Good morning. I'm Ken Turbovich. I'm a specialty pharmaceutical analyst here for Janney, and it's 9:55, so we're going to try to keep it on schedule. The presentation that's going to begin now is for KemPharm. With us today, we have Travis Mickle, that for those of you who don't know, has an extensive history of developing prodrugs, and in particular prodrugs for the ADHD space. And so from a standpoint of diligence, one of the things I was most impressed with when I decided to initiate on KemPharm was looking at the IP for Vyvanse. If you look at the KemPharm website, you will see that it says he's the principal inventor for Vyvanse. And so I decided to test that statement, and I looked at the FDA Orange Book where there are 17 patents listed for Vyvanse. And I said, well, that's nice. I want to look at every single one of those and see if Travis's fingerprints are here. And what you will see if you go back to our initiation and if you take the time to do what I did and look at every single one of those patents, Travis is listed as an inventor, as a patent holder on every single one of those patents protecting Vyvanse. So from that perspective, when we talk about KemPharm and its prodrug expertise, you can't think of someone who would frankly know any more than Travis, because it would be impossible to know more. From my perspective, it brings me great comfort because it means that it's not the first time around. A small company oftentimes is thought of as having a lack of expertise or a lack of credibility from the street, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to understand that foundational element of who it is that's behind this company and what their expertise brings to bear. It's not just that they've got a good idea. It's not just that they've got good scientists. It's not just that they've got a good formulation. It's that they've been there and done it before, and this isn't the first time. And so from that perspective, I think it's extremely exciting to see the work that they're doing to try to bring the benefits of prodrug technology that Travis was involved in bringing to amphetamines, bringing that same technology to bear on methylphenidate, which is the other primary stimulant used to treat ADHD. And we're especially pleased today to see that they have new data that was just announced this morning on the third of the 3 human abuse potential studies that they were doing to further elucidate the benefits of the prodrug technology. So here to tell us more about that is Travis Mickle. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ken. I think everything after that is going to be a big disappointment. So I appreciate you building me all up. I'll just be sure to let everyone down from here on out. Standard forward-looking statements. And Ken gave my intro and my background. You know, with all those great patents comes a lot of continuing work. So it all sounds well and good, but it also comes with Shire continuing to call me saying, can you go to Canada? Can you go to be at this deposition? It's not a lot of fun. But anyway, back to KemPharm. Same approach. We take the existing active drugs, we modify those to create prodrugs, and fundamentally then advance those through the FDA process. So we have the same team of chemists that worked with me at New River Pharmaceuticals is the same team of scientists that we have at KemPharm. We also have many of the same folks that developed Vyvanse while at New River are still, with me and in the team here at KemPharm. So it's a unique story. It's not a expertise or knowledge base that was dispersed. Some of us have known each other for more than 20 years and worked together in the prodrug space. So we take that expertise and we apply it in various forms in prodrugs. The prodrug, quite simply, is just taking an approved active ingredient, attaching something to it that we refer to as a ligand. Once that ligand is attached, you have a new chemical entity, new molecular entity. What's nice about that, it gives you a composition of matter-based patent, something that's never been discovered before. So you have that novel invention, and with fairly robust ways to protect it. After that product is ingested or taken as directed, the natural metabolic processes found in the body, usually through enzymatic cleavage, break it back down so this fundamentally is the same active ingredient you started with for the therapeutic effect. The prodrug adds a benefit, whether that change the metabolism, the absorption, how it's processed in the body. We can make better pharmacokinetics. It can make the product less abusable. You can use it for many, many different aspects. Our pipeline, this is just our clinical honestly, we have so much more even behind this. If we had unlimited money, I don't know if I'd have enough life within me to develop everything our scientists can find. So our lead two products are in the area of ADHD, as Ken mentioned. They are focused in methylphenidate. So the two most common ways to treat ADHD, over 90+% of the scripts, are with either amphetamine-based stimulants or methylphenidate-based stimulants. Here we have what would be the right hand to Vyvanse's left hand. Vyvanse being the prodrug of amphetamine, we have prodrugs of methylphenidate. Most advanced in that portfolio is KP415. This is really intended and was designed to be a methylphenidate version of Vyvanse. We have data that we announced this morning, and we also have a near-term NPA submission just first quarter of next year. Behind that is KP484. This is a different formulation of the same prodrug found in KP415. This is a product that's intended mainly for adults. Again, adults that require around-the-clock coverage of their symptoms. It's about a year behind KP415. We also have worked in the past extensively in the space of abuse-deterrent opioids and tried to advance a number of programs there. We have an FDA-approved product, Abadaz, and I will go into more detail about that. That's a prodrug of hydrocodone and acetaminophen. Therapeutically, this would look like Vicodin, Norco, Lortab, with some differentiated properties we can cover later. I mentioned our ability to make more than we could possibly ever develop. That's something that we would like to get into, and something we have been moving towards, is taking other people's ideas. We produce a prodrug and we hand them back off to them to continue development. Whether this is a product they already have that they'd like to improve the life cycle management of, or need some improvement, a product maybe they haven't developed yet, but it has some deficiency, or maybe a new indication for an old product where they'd like some differentiated intellectual property. And I think that's where we focused some of our early stage drug discovery efforts. We did have an announcement last year, roughly about this time, with Genco. This was a product in Tourette's with a prodrug type approach. We liked it so much we actually licensed it in. It fits very well with our ADHD and CNS portfolio. Turning now to ADHD, this is a very large and growing market, over $13 billion in annual sales. Methylphenidate and amphetamine really represent the two different classes. There is a population of patients who can't switch between the two. It's roughly about 30 to 40% on each side of that coin. The rest of them tend to switch where the better products are. So right now, Vyvanse has a large market share and does very well because it's the best product in its class of stimulants. We hope to change that someday with KP415. Our market research indicates, not just with prescribers, but also KOLs and thought leaders, the three unmet needs in the methylphenidate market are duration of action. Current products just don't last long enough. Lower abuse potential and onset of action. Onset of action is more focused on, thinking about early morning behaviors, especially for school-age children. You got to get them up, get them out the door. It'd be nice if they actually had the ability to remember to put their shoes on before they left the house. This is not an uncommon occurrence in my house some mornings. Lower abuse potential is really focused there on making the product less abusable. And you would say, well, is this abuse deterrent? Is this something that physicians here don't really understand and payers aren't paying for? Vyvanse actually currently has some language on its label about its ability to be less abusable than immediate release amphetamine. Concerta also has some very limited language. But what surprised us here was when you asked pain physicians, so pain physicians and primary care physicians, name an abuse deterrent product. Half of them named Vyvanse. Very few of them could name an actual abuse deterrent product. This was in a market survey we did for our Abadaz product. It has a perception that is in fact less abusable, even though it doesn't have claims towards that. So this is an important consideration when you talk about the prescribing physicians in this class. Just looking at the competitive landscape here, again, these are the top products within the space. They also, some of them, like Atilox XR, Focalin XR, and Concerta, also have generic equivalents. you can see the various numbers of different attributes. I mentioned Vyvanse has some difference in drug liking, Focalin or Concerta even less so. The duration with these products is lackluster, especially the methylphenidate product. Vyvanse really has moved the needle back to the amphetamine side because it does have duration past 12 hours. It's the first product that really demonstrated that at 13. Adderall XR, Focalin XR, and Concerta don't have any indication past 12. Most physicians say it's really 10 to 12. It doesn't last as long as the other, as Vyvanse does. We get the question all the time, what about reimbursement? You're bringing a branded product into a heavily genericized market. About half the market is generic. And this answer to this is quite simple. This category is just not actively managed. The approval rate here is very high. The WAC price between generic and brand is not that big a difference. And it's a lifelong consideration. Why would a payer want to put the resources to block these things? Every one of these scripts, before it's written for that lifelong indication, has a prior authorization, has step edits, and that's just the natural course of this form of treatment. So it's what physicians are very aware of what they need to get through in this space. It is unique. It is a patient-driven marketplace. They want the best products, whether you're a parent providing for your child or you're the actual patient. You want something that actually works, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. You can also see the average out-of-pocket cost for these particular products per month are not terribly different between a generic and a brand, $40 compared to $20. So that's why, again, we don't believe there is a significant barrier here, or really ever has been in this space, even though there are generic products out there. You can even see Focalin XR and Concerta, even though they've been generic for years, still have considerable market share just based on their product attributes and their name brand. So turning now to KP415 and how we designed this product. This is a co-formulation of immediate release D-methylphenidate with our prodrug. It's referred to as Seer Dex methylphenidate, SDX for short. I've also called it KP415 prodrug. So you may hear all three of those at some point. Again, same benefits. We want to have longer duration. We have better onset of action. We want to have lower abuse potential. Some things that people don't appreciate as much is that the PK profile here could be very beneficial. So providing an onset, duration, and an effect throughout the day that people know what it is and how it'll work. Many of these formulation approaches don't provide that. Additionally, there's been, over the last 5-6 years, a bunch of products have been developed that are solutions, orally dissolving tablets. These are mainly for kids and mainly for patient compliance. Well, with our product, you can just open it up, sprinkle it on applesauce, put it in Kool-Aid, orange juice, whatever, and it works exactly the same. So there is no additional need. On top of that, because it's not a formulation-based, it's a very small capsule. So it's same size as Vyvanse, which reports very little issues with this type of administration. One thing that we have added, because we did get our pediatric study plan actually approved, is that we could be the first methylphenidate product approved in preschoolers. This is a common, prescriptions are written commonly for this age group. It's usually when it presents is in this age group is 4 to 5. It's not, you go out and do market research, it's hard to find. Many of the physicians don't list it because it's off-label. They don't want people to know that what the age of the kids are that are taking these products. So functionally, I think this could be a small advantage for us, but certainly one that other methylphenidates don't have. And then what many people don't realize is that we do have a very strong patent portfolio around this, composition of matter-based patents that have been issued already around until 32. That's for the family of molecules. The specific entity, it would go till 37 if that patent is actually issued. So an extensively long product life. We announced back in July results of our first efficacy study for this particular product. It's actually the only efficacy study we're required to do. This is a traditional classroom design. Classroom designs involve bringing in school-age children 6 to 12. Usually you dose optimize them to some dose that works. These patients have fairly significant ADHD. Once they're in the classroom, they're given a math test. While they're taking that math test, there's actually individual raters in the back of the room that measure their inattentiveness, their how much they hit their neighbor, how much hyperactivity they exhibit, and they do that. That's referred to the SCAMP score. So our primary endpoint for this particular study was the average SCAMP score over the course of the day. We nailed the primary endpoint here. It's a powerful neurostimulant. You wouldn't expect anything less. So certainly this is a highly efficacious product. Our original thesis about using a baseline calculation, the week before we actually did the laboratory classroom, actually did not pan out. And we did take a baseline on the particular day that we measured in the laboratory, and that's there on the right-hand side is visit 6. There's been a lot of debate here about, why did KemPharm do this? Why is this an issue, not an issue? Fundamentally, it's a statistical glitch, right? We had a baseline that we had a theory or a hypothesis around. It didn't pan out. We're not cherry-picking the data. This is the exact same patients. It's the exact same numbers that were taken at the laboratory classroom day. It's just how you interpret the data or how you analyze the data after that. If you do it with baseline 5, you do it inaccurately. You do it what introduces a period effect into that analysis, which is problematic if you're a statistician. If you do it with baseline 6, like what we have done here, you show duration, onset of action at a half hour, up to 13 hours. All of our supporting data, everything we have for this product says that that's the duration of effect. So we believe and we focus that this will be actually what we have on the label. The pre-specified was a glitch. It's not something the FDA is going to hold us over the fire for. It really is, the proper science lies on the right-hand side with the visit 6 baseline data. This is really verified with the PERP. This is the math test that they take at the same time. Regardless of baseline, you have onset and duration through the entire time course from a half hour to 13 hours. So just to sum up the efficacy trial, again, primary endpoint was met. We believe, our experts believe, that the visit 6 is actually the baseline we should be looking at, that the FDA will look at. There's plenty of precedent for this division to do these sorts of analyses and go with a scientifically valid approach. There are secondary endpoints also measured with parent ratings in the morning and evenings. The WREMB-R scale showed differences in the morning and evening that would be indicative of effect during those same times in which we measured. More importantly, I think, is we went back and compared effect size. So this is the only way you can compare across different clinical studies. We looked at the effect size, and from our data, reported data for Concerta and Vyvanse, again, very similar. And you can look at time points related to Focalin XR, very similar. Their 12-hour look like our 13-hour, and that's what they have on their label. So we're very encouraged by this study. We would say this is a solid 8.5, 9 out of 10. It's got a little bit of additional questions we have to ask of the agency, but we feel confident this is the data that will be on the label. Turning now to the other side of the coin, so we have our onset, we have our duration for the product. Here we have start of our human abuse potential study. So this is the after oral administration. This is a high dose of our prodrug only. So this is not inclusive of the immediate release component. So this high dose was roughly 1.5 times the equivalent dose of the Focalin XR there in the dark blue or navy blue that the agency asked us to compare it to. You can see there's statistically significant difference between both doses of Seer Dex methylphenidate than Focalin XR. Interestingly as well, it's different than phentermine. So if I turn to the next slide, those were just the drug liking Emax. So looking at drug liking and the peak levels that you would see, this is drug liking over time. So maybe that Emax, I'm just going to go back for a second, maybe this Emax that we actually see here for Seer Dex methylphenidate actually happened at 8 hours. Well, for the Focalin XR, their Emax happened at 2. There is a big difference here when you actually look at the drug liking over time. So this is comparing our high dose placebo and Focalin XR there in the dark blue. When you look at phentermine, phentermine is a Schedule 4 drug. So we compared Focalin XR, a Schedule 2 extended release product versus Seer Dex methylphenidate. Now we have a Schedule 4 versus Seer Dex methylphenidate. Still lower at the moment drug liking, as well as the low dose of ours was lower than phentermine, and our high dose was equivalent to. So every indication that when taking this orally, it's less abusable than a Schedule 2 and no more abusable than a Schedule 4 product. Data we announced this morning, this is after intranasal administration of the prodrug. So now again, taking the same human abuse potential assessment, looking at drug liking. Drug liking Emax here is pretty high for D-methylphenidate. Numbers in the 90s and 100s usually indicate a high likelihood of abuse. Intranasal is one of the most prominent ways that these products are abused. Again, statistically significant difference between our product and the D-methylphenidate comparator, certainly better than placebo. You also look here at the moment drug liking. Yeah, we did have a peak effect that was, if you looked on the last chart, that was a little bit high, but clearly this didn't happen immediately. There was an effect that happened slowly over time, but not the same for D-methylphenidate, where the abusers would take it and immediately get that high from that particular product. This was previously announced intravenous data, came out I think last May. Here there was actually, when you inject the prodrug into the abuser, there's no statistical difference between the effect they get with Seer Dex methylphenidate and placebo. So it's essentially the same as injecting a saline solution. You look at it over time, well, it was placebo before, so it still is. I think to kind of summarize here, and we did say this in our press release, these studies were required by the FDA. This product right now, the prodrug itself, is not scheduled, so it has to go through a formal scheduling decision. The FDA is the party who actually does the medical review. They look at the science, and they make a recommendation to the DEA on what the schedule should be. The DEA, not having those individuals at that organization, they don't actually determine the schedule. The FDA kind of does. The DEA prints it, right? They take that and adopt that scheduling. So it's important for us to convince the FDA that there is a lower potential for abuse here, because we do believe, number one, that it has the real potential for being a different schedule as a prodrug, and number two is that because the agency has required us to do these studies, that this data should go on the label. So that's a real big value proposition for us. Vyvanse has some of this types of data. They have IV data. It doesn't even look close to ours. I mean, ours is amazing. That one's kind of good. Their oral data is and ours is outstanding. So there is big differences. They didn't do intranasal studies at all either. All that's left here is additional tampering data. All of our prodrugs are designed to be very chemically stable. So it's part of the thesis we move into when we start. Turning now quickly to the adult ADHD space, KP484, kind of the other side of this coin. Shire, I think it was last June, actually announced the approval of this product, MyDayis. It launched it in the third quarter. It's actually done fairly well. I think the scripts are growing nicely for Shire. This is a super long-acting product. Adults make up the largest percentage here. This subset of adults that really require really long duration, they believe is a $500 million opportunity for just the MyDayis product. So really this is the same sort of approach. Again, we want it to be less abusable. It's going to be at much higher doses than KP415. It'll be around the clock or all day. You can see this. This is, again, normalized scales. Ours is methylphenidate. Theirs is MyDayis, is amphetamine-based. But still, we wanted to design the product off of what is an established clinical product. So something that's actually shown this effect and done well in therapy. So that's exactly what we've done with KP484. So where are we with these products? I think I mentioned before that we're going to file the NDA first quarter of next year for KP415. 484 is about a year behind that, so expect an NDA about a year later. We are right now in pretty significant partnering discussions on both of these products. Both of them use the same prodrug, so they can't really go different places. They both have similar indications for ADHD, so we feel that everybody's going to want both, so that's what we're proceeding with. We hope to have this product partnered before year end, so a very meaningful milestone for the organization. Turning now quickly to our first approved product. This was approved back in February through ups and downs and ins and outs with the FDA. We actually started off with a CRL, moved to an appeal, resubmitted, and actually got the product approved last February. It's a prodrug of hydrocodone in combination with acetaminophen. This is used for acute pain, typically, like therapeutically, like a Vicodin, Norco, or Lortab. This is the first product of that class to actually have any sort of differentiated properties. It does not have the traditional abuse deterrent claims. The studies that we conducted, as would be required for abuse deterrence, we did not meet the primary endpoints of those studies. But there were significant enough differences that through the appeal process that the agency agreed should be labeled for physicians to understand. And those include when the product is taken intranasally, that actually has a reduced exposure to hydrocodone, overall early especially, but as well the drug liking in the early time points was lower. Additionally, because it's a prodrug, it's actually difficult to take the prodrug itself and convert it to free hydrocodone. So those 3 points were in the label, are in the label for the product, and I'll turn now to what we're doing with it at this point. So now that it is approved, we've been going down kind of two dual paths. This marketplace is functionally completely generic. Average prices in this group range from like 25 to 45 cents per tablet. It's 5 billion tablets dispensed annually. So you're still talking about over $1 billion market opportunity. But fundamentally, if we went in with a branded strategy, with a product, even with great labeling, I think every PBM and payer we spoke to before we thought about a branded launch said we would do everything in our power to block you, stop you, and prevent you from ever getting access to our plans. Because if you take a 25-cent thing and make it $1 or $2, that really changes their mathematics quickly on that type of volume. So we went ahead and through this whole process of appeal, realized that the abuse deterrent market was floundering, that they weren't getting adopted. There wasn't government regulation helping as much as needs to be to really convert the market to something safer. And so one of the PBMs we had met with early on said, you know, if you would just give it to us at what our price, our acquisition price is, we'll just swap it out. We'll do a complete swap. We'll essentially block everybody else effectively. Well, at the time we thought that guy was pretty funny, but you know, watching this whole space, kind of seeing where the label would go in the process, we went back and this is a real opportunity. We've met with many PBMs. We know that there's a lot of people interested, and so that's a partnership we hope to have in place before year end with a payer or you know, healthcare plan, PBM, whatever it has to be. Maybe it's one, maybe it's many. On top of that, again, I mentioned it's a 5 billion unit marketplace. You have to have capacity, you have to have distribution, and you have to have the ability to actually manufacture this. So when we looked at this, we said, well, we really need what is a large generic manufacturer that can help partner this, that can help us lead the commercial effort, give the credibility on the other side of that coin, and I think that's, again, something we plan to have in place before year end. So a number of expected milestones. These are the clinical ones. We've rapidly completed many of the data announcements. We have NDA submissions. We have 2 potential product classes with potential partnerships before year end. So a number of interesting catalysts. The company's cash position at the end of June was roughly $29 million. This is expected to take us into, but not through, the first quarter of this year. One thing our CFO noted on our last call is that some of the budget that would be associated with those numbers is associated with Apodaz. So if that product is approved or licensed out, functionally that cost would go to that partner. So there would be some additional runway upon that signed license agreement. All right, I think that ends my presentation. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions? I know I've got one that I'll ask maybe the Apodaz question first. There have been a couple of developments with buprenorphine, which is a Schedule 3, where in the past insurers like Humana and Express Scripts prohibited, oftentimes blocked, as you described, sort of these branded attempts to have a Schedule 3 opioid instead of a Schedule 2, which often those Schedule 2s are far less expensive. These are chronic these are for patients with chronic pain. These are extended release long-acting opioids. In the sense of that marketplace in the last 6 months, we've seen some major changes. Humana in March actually added a product called Belbuca, where they previously had blocked them. They not only added them, they put them in a preferred position. They also removed step edits and prior authorizations. Express Scripts here on August 15th just actually added again Belbuca on a preferred position, where in the past there were obviously levels of reimbursement and sort of efforts to manage or to control so that patients would not have access to that branded product. When you hear or see about those kinds of changes that have occurred, does that help to give you confidence that some of these same payers would be some of the same ones that might be responsive to your efforts with Apodaz?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think for many of our efforts we've not had a no. So we've spoken to many different plans, different types of programs. We've not had a no. It's just, you know, again, without the capacity, people are a little bit concerned. It's like, well, I do 100 million tablets a year. Can you supply all of that? So we're trying to answer the right questions in the right order, but you're absolutely right. I mean, there is huge receptivity at these plans, especially if their economics aren't greatly impacted, or in this case, impacted at all, be at equivalent price to what they're currently paying, but perhaps for a better product.
Sure. And then we've seen recently a collaboration between Nevicar and Endo on some products that are not yet approved. Does that give you hope that there are generic partners out there that would be readily willing to sign that sort of partnership or collaboration to manufacturers so that you can answer that capacity piece for those payers?
Sure. I mean, I think there's examples of what we're attempting to do in numerous places. So yeah, I think our own experience says that there's plenty of interest. People would love to fill their manufacturing capacity and also have a product that has some value and real opportunity without using a traditional sales force.
And then one question just back to the oral data that you presented this morning. When we look at the oral data, or I'm sorry, not the oral, the intranasal data, if we can take a quick look, one question I did have was just relating back to some of what your experience was from Apodaz having to do with the nasal insufflation. Is there some sense from your perspective that there is GI uptake that's occurring with the intranasal administration in the data that we're seeing for Seer Dex methylphenidate on the intranasal side?
Actually, no. There does not seem to be much contribution from the oral side here. Orally, our prodrug, you can look back at this slide for the oral studies that we conducted, same as phentermine. I mean, the Emax happens out about 7 to 8 hours. And so we don't see that with the intranasally. So it's well absorbed, apparently. What gets in isn't, again, it's IV-like, so it isn't broken down. There must be some mechanism in which it's being broken down, but very, very, very slowly and to a very small extent. So it's very interesting how this molecule is working now. It's specifically to the GI tract, where that's the mechanism it's going to break down. It seems to be in the lower intestines or colon. So that's really, again, a very unique component here that wasn't present with Vyvanse, isn't present with the formulation.
And to your point on the Vyvanse side, I went back and looked at the label. There is no data in the label for an intranasal study. Were there no studies done, or is it just that the studies that weren't done didn't rise to the level of the agency feeling as though they deserved to be in the label?
Back when we assessed the human abuse potential, they weren't really concerned about intranasal, so they didn't ask us to do it. And so at the time, New River didn't do those types of studies if you didn't ask them. There wasn't a lot of precedent on how to do them, right? It was thought you're going to have a nasal delivery mechanism. All of that was very, very early days for abuse deterrence, abuse liability work. So nothing was ever done, actually. I think they ended up doing a science experiment to figure out how things break down over time intranasally, but they never conducted a human abuse potential intranasal study.
So in that sense, data we're seeing from the intranasal side this morning, first time ever done for any drug in ADHD.
That's correct. This is the first of its kind data. And again, all of the comparisons we have, it's the first of the kind data that we've ever seen.
Sure.
I mean, I've worked in this space more than 25 years, and for a stimulant to produce really no effect, regardless of how you take it, towards the abuse side is just phenomenal. It works great when you take it for therapy. It just doesn't when you try to abuse it at really high doses, intranasally or intravenously.
Got it. I'm going to open it back up for questions from the floor.
How do you balance your desire to do capital raise versus a partnership to get you to the next level?
That's a strategic balance, between how much capital you want to have to potentially not have a partner wait you out or give you low bar offers versus the dilution that you would take from any capital raise. So it's something that we continually monitor and make sure that we're on top of for the company. As I mentioned before, one of the partnerships we hope to have offsetting costs, perhaps income from an Apodaz license with a generic partner. So there are opportunities that we feel, hey, if we balance these, we can really optimize everything for our shareholders.
And so I look that Shire has deter other potential partners.
The right of first refusal that Shire has on KP415, we don't believe so. Fundamentally, they have a patent cliff coming up for Vyvanse, which is a $3 billion product in 23-24 timeframe. They need replacement therapies for this. Certainly, the whole Takeda buyout was because of their CNS strength. So certainly, I think those individuals that work there now want to continue that. But at the end of the day, the way we are approaching this is more like an auction. So it goes to the highest bidder. If they want to have last bid, that's it, right? It makes no difference to us. We just want the best deal for the company.
Other questions? So I do have, sorry, go ahead, Flynn.
You just mentioned earlier about the potential for the pre-K, target market. What, is there a particular drug that kids of that age are taking right now? I guess that's the first part of the question. The second part is, how often is it that within a family the kids are all taking the same drug? I assume it's pretty high, but I don't know if it's data or not.
We don't have data on it. I can tell you from my own family, everybody does, but that's myself and my kids. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of data on that. For that age group, it's what you could find from IMS or Synchrony Health or whatever. It looks like very small numbers, but I know, like most of the physicians I've spoken to, it's actually higher. They just put 6 on the script because it's off-label and they don't like to have people looking over their shoulder. It's a controlled substance, right? So there is some concerns there. It is the same split, but it's heavily weighted towards methylphenidate. So there's no approved methylphenidate right now that's for that age group. So we think it's a great way to get in to a pediatric psychiatrist, a pediatrician's office, and say, hey, look, we're offering this. It's got these other benefits. It really could be a great way to get the product adopted quickly.
Travis, a couple times in the presentation, you mentioned that there's pending IP that would take you to 2037.
Right.
Can you explain the difference between that IP that's pending and the IP that's already issued?
So just broadly, when we discover a molecule, we try to patent all the kind of backup compounds and derivatives and everything we've prepared and everything we think is defendable. So that's what we did with the first one, and it was issued based on a general structure for what would KP415 prodrug look like. The specific entity itself had some novelty about it, so there was some differences from it than the rest of the family. And so we filed that application, as you can tell, last year. so it would run to 37. Again, in my experience of being an inventor on more than 100 patents, I think it's got a really good chance of getting issued because it is unique. It is a new composition that wasn't claimed in the other and now has different properties. So that's a highly likelihood it's going to be to 37.
And then just with regard to the human abuse potential studies and the other studies that have been conducted or contemplated for the other formulations, like KP484, do you see other opportunities for IP from that? I mean, when we look at the portfolio for Vyvanse, part of the reason I brought it up was obviously there's 17 different patents and we've got a handful here. It's suggestive of the fact that we could see a much broader patent fence than even what we're currently seeing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's how you build that tree. You start with a good molecule, you build on how you're going to use it, how you formulate it, how you make it, and that's how you defend those patents properly. There's other indications that we've talked about in the past. Binge eating is something that Vyvanse is approved for. This certainly would have a similar, could have a similar effect. Methylphenidate's been used in treatments of things like Tourette's, tics. It's also been used for different mood disorders, as well as ideas like stimulant for stimulant abusers that may need stimulant therapy. So there's tons of ways that methylphenidates have been explored in the past, and I think we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here, because a prodrug that has very little to no abuse potential that provides the same stimulant activity when used therapeutically could be a great opportunity.
That's great. Well, thanks for coming and sharing the data and spending the time to tell us more about the story. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.